Dag nabbit! I keep pushing the wrong button. Okay. No, I went back to. I don't look over my videos very often, so sorry guys, but I'm busy most of the time. Not every time. I'll try to be a little more diligent. But on the Gizmatic, a lot of people ask me where I get the Gizmatic from. One guy mentioned, is it worth the cost? Well, I guess he says you can go to a machine shop and get a more accurate job. If you go to the machine shop guy that paid $10,000 or $12,000 for his valve grinder, yeah, you know your Rottlers or your what was the one that I had there? Sioux. I had an old Sioux, but if you had to operate the Sioux perfectly, you couldn't screw up. If you dressed the tip of the valve, the collet and the stop in the back would be incredibly accurate. It's a beautiful machine. Quickway was another one that worked real well. I don't know if Vulcan or Storm Vulcan ever built one or not. I think Sonnen, I believe they had one. But I got an old Black & Decker, and guys have been using Black & Deckers for almost a century at this point. But anyway, to get the Neway and the accuracy that I've seen from it, no, I didn't get the valve and put it on there and see what the runout and all that was. What I did was I was using the Neway system and put one of those Gizmatic valves against a seat. And then vacuum test it with a hand vacuum pump and a Goodson adapter. Goodson has a bunch of adapters for vacuum checking cylinder ports or exhaust and intake ports to vacuum check your valves. So I bought one of those. In fact, I bought a couple of them and put my hand. Yeah, everybody else has a hand vacuum pump. Well, I don't do many heads, maybe half a dozen a year at the most. No big deal. So I put that up against there, make sure the surface is clean, of course. And I didn't even oil it, but that would help. Put the oil against it, pump the thing up, and you just watch the needle very slowly come down because your valve guide's going to have a leak. It's just a natural leak. That tells you two things: your valve seat and your valve guide. Because I had another head, we had to cheat on the valve guides. They wanted to reuse them. So it didn't hold very good vacuum. But it did hold enough so that I knew problem solved. Now, if you're going to do one like I do, because they're antiques, and some of these things will allow you up to 8 thousandths and 6 thousandths valve to guide clearance. I mean, ridiculous numbers that we're not used to. When, thousandths and a half, 2 thousandths is plenty, and on the old tractors, 3. You're not going to hold air. So take an O-ring and roll it down the valve guide, put a little grease on top of it, and lock it to it, and then you can check just your valve seat. All right, you see, well, why don't I just put a positive on old tractors and antique stuff? No, I don't recommend positive valve seals. I know a lot of people put them on, and that's fine, but I do not recommend it. The new actual positive valve seals are actually still designed to leave some oil film on that valve, but if it wasn't built for it, if you're running an old engine with 10W30 or 5W30 synthetic oil, and you're doing hard work with it, yeah, now I'd say put positive valve guides on it. Well, what's that got to do with it? Everything. Okay, the two companies I work with for the Gizmatic. One is Beam Equipment and Supplies. I put Beam Equipment or something else, but anyway. This phone number is 301-842-7095. I've never called. I've always emailed, because he has an email on there for it. Beamequipment.store is what he has on here. I think I started looking it up, beamequipment.com, but you could do beamequipment.store as it says here. Beam has Neway, Sioux, Sonnen, Quickway, Van Norman, JB Manufacturing, Winona Van Norman, Storm Vulcan, Burco. And then you could go, it says view all brands, and there's piles of them here. So he handles a lot of stuff that I've never even heard of unless I was in the engine machine more often. He even handles Goodson. Goodson is not well priced, but Goodson has a lot of available stuff that nobody else does. What was the other one that I had here? There it is. Neway Manufacturing. I often buy direct. They have 2 numbers. Where'd it go? Okay. It went backwards. Here we are. Their direct number is 989-743-3458. And their toll-free number, in case you need it, is 800-248-3889. Then their email is info@newaymfg.com, and that's Neway, Neway. And if you do call in there, the one lady I talk to continuously, she knows the company from way back. And the interesting thing is that when I asked her, I said, "Do you have any serial number records?" And she said, "For what?" And I told her I got a VFR 1000 here. I bought off of eBay. She said, "Really?" I said, "Yeah." Gave her the serial number. She sent back to me, because I had a tag on it, and I hadn't seen the tag yet, that a vocational shop out there in Michigan owned it nearby them and had it for many years. And I said, "The kids didn't destroy it yet?" The VFR 1000 has great accuracy. I mean, if you keep good cutters on it, I've cut some pretty hard exhaust valves on the thing. Beautiful finish. You just have to be mindful that mine isn't perfect on one hand, where if the cutter goes out, it makes its cut. When it comes back through, because of even though it has ways to tighten up all the ways on it, it's different going back. So you see it make another cut. And if you let the thing just very carefully do its thing, you can come up with a beautiful valve. And if you're concerned about it, like one guy kept talking about lapping the valves, I don't see the need for it. But I take a maroon colored 3M pad, lay it on the seat of the valve, move it back and forth a couple times, a few revolutions, and you will have a seat to die for. I mean, it's beautiful. And you say, "Well, yeah, but that's not," well, no, that's a machine surface. You're going to have some machine marks. You just can't get away from it. But if the seat is cut the same and the valve face is cut the same circular method, the two will lap themselves in very quickly. And I've done it a few times. Slapped the valve against a seat, vacuum checked it, and come out very good without having springs on it even. So, hand vac. Yeah, I don't have, just a simple hand vac. Seriously. So, people want to fight about accuracy and everything else. And you're talking about small engine work, you're in a small shop, you're doing your own work at home. Yeah, you can put thousands into this thing. But I would say probably for $1,000, and if you wanted to keep monkeying with engines at home for a particular length of time, and the local shop is quite expensive, you could sink in $5,000 and come up with enough stuff to make a decent cylinder head. Between a Platin sander that everybody says, "Don't ever do it," but if you're careful and smart, it works excellent. If you're not careful, it will destroy. As I will never disagree with anybody that says never Platin sand a head, because this can happen. They're always correct. None of them are ever wrong. You understand what I'm saying? Well, machine surface is always... No, it's not always better. I had several customers that came to me for one thing in particular. Well, two actually. They like the surface finish better on aluminum heads when they're rehead gasketing an older engine. I was in 10-year-old 10-year-old V6 Fords 3.8. A lot of those in which cars? They hit them in several cars. But anyway, the 3.8 was a 302 with two cylinders lopped off. And he says, "Yours is he says, "I measured it and checked it. Yours is a flat surface. Nobody else is." And then the other machines were reputable machine shops. The main problem is if you have a circular cutter, you don't cut on both sides. You have to have a lead. When you have a lead, now the cutter goes down and comes up to the high outside and the low front. And if it's not set properly, if you want, how can I say this? If you want production, your lead has to be almost about 2/1000. Okay? You just don't have a choice, because it's going to push back. And you need to keep the tail, and you need to keep it from hopping, especially on a CBN cutter with one or two cutters, and then it freewheels and hits again. You're going to get a little flex in the thing. There's just no way around it. Enough to make a difference if you handle it correctly? No. But all too often, the local shops were either broach cutters that they didn't set up right, or they were CBN high-speed cutters, which do an excellent job, CBN or PCD for aluminum, I should say, and they had to have that lead. Like I say, production, if you're running things back and forth fast, you need to keep that lead in there because it's going to push up a little bit every cut that it goes across. And he says, yours is the only flat surface. There's nobody else can. He says, I put a bar on there. He says, I can see under it. And where I can see under it is between the cylinders where they always blow out and cause the main trouble. So I won. But you do have to be very careful, especially in my case, because I had to change 3-phase into single-phase. Got to have a starter button. Yeah, it got a little sketchy now and then, but once I got learning how to use it, set it on there, run it. Don't keep it in one spot, move it back and forth so your whole table gets worn all the same. So over long periods of time, you don't have to readjust everything. And your head runs on the belt, so the belt stays consistent. There's too many things that can go wrong if you don't stop and think. And it's hard to figure out. You got to spend $50 to $75 for another belt if you're not careful. And that can get expensive if you're doing a lot of work over the years. And I used to do work in Sharon Springs where almost once a month I'd have to change a belt. Change the belt. It hurts. But it's easy to set up. Once you get it set up, you just run it. You almost never have to touch it again. But if you work it too hard, you're working and you can tear the seam, you can tear a hole in the belt, and that starts wearing out underneath. There's a lot of stuff you need to be careful of that I have run into myself in the past. But a platen sander, a Neway Gizmatic, and a Neway valve seat cutters, just get the cutters that you need. And if you're doing work at home and you want to do a little performance work, they do have cutters to, I think, to 70, possibly 80 degrees for bull hogging, that you can do by hand. There's a turning, I think they just call it a turn tool. You don't use the T handle. If you want to spend more money, you get the doggone valve driver. If you get the multi-speed valve driver, you can really get into it very, very nicely. But they have a turn tool. For home, it works great. It's about this tall, has a handle that flops up. Set it down. It has a spring load that you can control your seat pressure. Turn the dang handle. You'll come up with the same results. The T handle, you always end up stopping, and if you're not careful, you stop in the same place, and you'll end up with a seat that is not concentric. In fact, we'll have a couple of low spots from starting up under pressure at a different speed. Will it work? Sure it will. It'll still work fine because you need to stop and do smooth cuts of your own. But if you use the turn tool, problem solved. Not 100%, but for the most part, handle it gently for your last couple of cuts. It's just, there's too many easy manual things to do at home, and for small engine service work, antiques and such, drop a few thousand. It's well worth it. If they still built the VFR 1000, I'd highly recommend it. It's simple, it's small, it's lightweight, hardly takes up any space, easy to operate, and mine has a couple of small problems, and still, it's doing very well. So, then I got the old Black & Decker grinder to back it up, plus the Gizmatic. Then I've got the T-handle tools. I also have the turn tool, and I found a used driving motor, standard driving motor, 60 RPM, single speed, and that makes it easy and quick, but I have to convert that to a foot, just as a toggle switch. That's insane. But it works if you're careful when you run your cutters. And the other one is I do have the multi-variable speed that has a lot of power. AC converted to DC, and you can control the RPM. Because for me, I have a seat pocket cutter to install seats where there haven't been seats before. Or as I ran into on a John Deere cylinder head, I use that to cut the old seats out. And the accuracy is insane. I cut down through and actually had just a couple of small streaks in the original bore where a little piece of dirt got between my cutter because I was cutting to a particular John Deere diameter, figuring I had to put seats in. And it was, you could see the marks, the black mark where old cast, and just a little light scratch all the way around. And then it went to the bottom and stopped, and I couldn't figure out why it stopped. Took it apart and pulled out a little bitty 2 or 3 thousandths thick piece of bottom of the valve seat. I thought it was nuts, so I tried it again. Worked perfect all the way across. Just drive in the new seats with some glue and go. So those of you who want to argue the accuracy of the system, talking to the wrong guy. No, it's not going to be your 250 or 500,000 or 10,000 whatever for your other machines. But for backyard, are you kidding? It's not production. And the beauty of it is you need a seat in your flathead engine. I can drop all this on your flathead engine and bore a hole for a seat. Can't do that very well with some of the other machines. I mean, they can. Maybe you watch, what's his name there? Steve Morris Engines. I doubt he'd ever work on one, but at the same time, the stuff he has there, the Rattler, that'll do it. Set it up, but the funny thing is, you couldn't afford it because they have to set it up, and they actually have to map out the engine before they allow the thing to do the cutting. But boy, will you get a seat. But you have to map it. I don't. Time to go. You folks be good. I've burned up my time. I got to drink some more coffee, do some resting, maybe take a nap, and then get back out back and do some work. It's been a rough, sick week, and that's why I've been taking all this time off. And I've done, 3 videos in the last couple of days. So, but I thought there was enough people on there asking information on the Gizmatic that here it is. Beam Equipment and Neway Equipment, Corona, Michigan. And I've dealt with direct with Corona, Michigan since I got the valve seat pocket cutter. In fact, they told me, and this is back in 92, 93, somewhere in there. I bought the last one they made. Last one they had on the shelf, and they still had pieces and parts for it. So far, I haven't needed anything but cutters, which is normal. Anyway, just keep some thoughts on that, folks. It's possible if one of you wanted an actual seat pocket cutter, a seat counterbore cutter, that they may put one together for you or sell you the individual parts, because it's a simple system. And as I said before, it's not for production, but it's highly accurate and works very well. Everything that Neway has translated into the new era to some extent, but mostly gone into antique and some small engine work. But back in the 60s and 50s and 70s even, that allowed a shop, a car shop, or even a tractor shop to do a lot of the machine work in-house. So if you had a block and a head that were in serviceable condition, you could do valve and valve seat work right there. And we used to knurl valve guides back in the 50s, 60s, 70s. You could knurl the valve guides, ream them, clean them out, and put it back in and have a new valve job. In fact, they considered a lot of the knurled guides was designed not for the guides themselves. It was designed for the cast-in head valve guides, because the two ends, top and bottom, would often wallow out a little bit right in the line with the valve and the rocker. So we would run it in there. And what I was never taught and had to learn on my own is you run it in until it hardens and stops on the one end, then you run it in on the other end until it hardens and stops, and then run your reamer through there to do the final cleanup, your stainless brushes or brass, whatever, clean the whole thing out, and then start your measurements. Because you swedge the two ends and bring it back to the dimension of the center where the valve hasn't had much contact, you can end up with an excellent valve guide. Or the other way that some of you know is you get a larger valve reamer, ream the thing to a larger size so when you knurl it, it'll bring it back down. But you're only talking a few thousandths here, 5 to 10 maybe. So, but you don't need to run it all the way through, as I was originally taught multiple times. So, but if you have a head that's soft enough, yeah, you could run that thing through and it actually work hardens that cast iron. Then it ends up you can have a better guide. And I know you're going to get told by these other guys it's insane, don't do it, da-da-da. You're going to ruin everything, and it's old-fashioned. It is old-fashioned. And on old-fashioned stuff and old-fashioned castings and street stuff that you're looking to repair and put back on the road, or antiques and such, that's far more than adequate. But that's not cheap in its own right either. A knurling kit can be over $100. Something to keep in mind. All right, peace, long life. And remember, you may think it's crazy, but Jesus Christ is returning. And there's a Bible there I call the Encyclopedia Jesus, 66 books with many different penmen that wrote down the words that the Lord wanted. You'll find his path and the path to saving grace all in there. It's saving grace for salvation of your soul, by the Spirit of God, through Christ alone, by faith alone.